Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast from a dominant 20-point Minnesota Timberwolves win over the Nuggets. We'll talk about the Wolves' suffocating defense, holding Denver to just 95 points, again forcing Jamal Murray into a terrible offensive game, also a balanced offensive attack for Minnesota, a strong bench performance, and another great game from Julius Randle. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Happy Thursday, everybody. It's a victory Thursday after a sixth straight win from the Timberwolves. 6 straight wins, a season best win streak, 9 games above 500, a high watermark for the Wolves this season, a dominant 20-point win over Denver, holding the Nuggets to just 95 points. Today on the post-game pod, we'll talk about another great game from Julius Randle. We'll talk about a strong Anthony Edwards performance, a great second half from the Wolves bench, a really good job responding to a couple of runs by Denver, and most importantly, how impressive the defense was in this game against the Nuggets. A lot to talk about today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you could find Locked On Wolves. You could also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Also, a reminder, you can subscribe to the Locked On Wolves newsletter, lockedondaily.com, an email newsletter that's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. All right. So much to talk about in this game. The Wolves, of course, came into this game with a 2-0 season series lead over Denver, having not played since late January. The Wolves had already guaranteed at least a split in the season series, and both games had come at Target Center. Remember, the last time the Wolves were in Denver was Game 7 of the second round last season, when the Wolves had that massive second half comeback. Coming into this game, the Wolves, of course, now healthy. The Nuggets missing Aaron Gordon, who's doubtful coming in with the calf injury he suffered on Sunday. It's the second straight game he's missed. And the Wolves jumped on Denver early in this one. They really did. Also, I should to further set the stage, the Wolves were in the seventh place in the Western Conference. Golden State had already won, which they just keep doing. And the Wolves needed to win to keep pace. They're in a virtual tie for 6 in the West, but they're a game back in the loss column to the Warriors. So they really needed to win to keep pace there and to stay a game and a half up on LA, the Clippers, who also won on Wednesday night. So an important game for Minnesota, to say the least. And by the way, I know there's only 16 games left. They're now only 4.5 games behind Denver for the 3 spot in the West, and they have the tiebreaker over the Nuggets. Think about that. They're only 4 games out of the 4 spot, and the Lakers, who have now lost 2 games in a row. So there's a lot still in front of Minnesota. This game was very important to keep the good vibes rolling, going into another softer spot in the schedule, a 5-game homestand upcoming. And the Wolves came out like they knew just that. They came out, jumped out to an 8-2 lead, I think it was, ultimately winning the first quarter by 8 points. The swarming defense, actually, the first quarter is probably the Wolves' worst defensive quarter overall, but there was still a lot of activity. And it was really just they missed shots early on offense. It was actually they scored the most points in the first quarter of any quarter in the game, the Wolves did. But the offense early on was a little bit disjointed. But then as things rolled through in the first quarter, and Nas got on the floor and Dante DiVincenzo got on the floor, Dante hit a couple of threes. The Wolves defense just kept, Russell Westbrook had a couple of Russell Westbrook plays, in a good way for Denver early in this game that kind of kept them hanging around. Jokic scored a little bit early. But the Wolves did a really good job at making Nikola Jokic work to get anything he got, and they limited passing lanes for him. And the old, make Joker score. That doesn't always work. The dude's really, really good, turns out. And yeah, he had 34 points. But you'd rather him be focused on scoring than easily dishing to teammates. And he finished with just 4 assists and 3 turnovers. The Wolves did, as I thought they would, and I noted this on Wednesday's show, is they tried to guard him with Rudy Gobert one-on-one. Outside of a foul on like the Nuggets, third or fourth possession of the game, a shooting foul that Gobert committed on Jokic, and then Jokic subsequently missed both free throws. I thought he did great. He altered a bunch of shots. He blocked at least one Jokic shot in this game. I guess he was only credited with one block, and that was on a Jokic attempt. He made Jokic shoot over him and was physical enough with him. On the flip side, when Jokic tried to guard Julius Randle was not deterred by Joker's size. He just went right into his chest and got a couple of foul calls, yes, but it was more the idea of, I'm just going to keep going through this brick wall, and it's good. There's going to be some give to it. And I'm not going to back down from this challenge. I'm going to create a shot for myself or for teammates. And we just keep seeing really strong play from Julius Randle. But I thought the mentality on both ends, from Gobert guarding Jokic on the defensive end and Randle going at Jokic on the offensive end, was very impressive. Now, Russell Westbrook guarded Randle for stretches early in the game. As the game wore on, though, it became, Westbrook was less of a factor, I thought, late in this game than he was early in the game. And the strategy had to shift a little bit with Denver down as much as they were. But the Wolves set the tone in the first kind of set of non-Jokic minutes. I think they were only like a +2 or something. But to at least win, they were like they were better than that in the Jokic minutes, like with Jokic on the floor. So to at least extend the lead a little with Jokic off the floor, that's a pretty good step in the right direction to winning the game. I thought that as the game wore on, the defensive pressure ratcheted up for Minnesota to the point where it felt like at some point in the second and third quarter that this was, game 2 of the second round of the playoffs last year, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker just hounded Jamal Murray like crazy all the way up the floor. That was happening again. Jamal Murray had 0 made shots at halftime. He had 1 point at halftime. Jamal Murray finished this game with 12 points on 15 shots. He had 8 assists, no turnovers, fine. You can live with Joker scoring 34 and have only 4 assists plus 3 turnovers, and you can live with Murray having 8 assists and no turnovers if you're holding the Joker to those 4 assists and you're holding Murray to 12 points on 15 shots and 1 of 5 on 3-point attempts, only 3 free throw attempts for Jamal Murray. A masterful job on defense for Minnesota. Nickeil only played 16 minutes in this game, but I bet Jamal Murray felt like he was out there for every minute of it. Every minute that Murray was on the floor. A really, really impressive defensive performance, not just from Nickeil. This was total swarming by the Wolves defense. And I was actually shocked when at the end of the game, I looked at the box score. The Wolves only had 7 steals and Denver had 9 steals. Minnesota only forced 10 Denver turnovers, and Denver forced 15 Minnesota turnovers. That feels completely off. Like, it kind of feels backwards. But the Wolves did score more points on those 10 Denver turnovers. In fact, they scored 19 points on 10 Nuggets turnovers. That's nearly 2 points a turnover, which is insane. Whereas Denver only scored 15 points off of 15 Minnesota turnovers. The Wolves had 17 fast break points in this game. They just advantageous. They did a good job defensively. And also, like 50-50 balls, they don't show up in the box score, as it turns out. They show up in some form or fashion as offensive rebounds or steals or whatever. But tip balls, deflections don't. I bet if we pulled deflections from this game, tracking data or whatever, the Wolves are going to have 3 times as many deflections as Denver. Active hands, multiple guys going to the ball. There were only a couple of first half possessions that were a bit dicey, with the Wolves having some sloppy turnovers, kind of late second quarter, I should say, where the Wolves had a double-digit lead. It got down to 9 at halftime. There was just kind of a stretch there where it felt a little dicey with how careless the Wolves were with the ball, and Denver had some fast break opportunities themselves. The Nuggets actually got to within 5 points early in the third quarter, and then all of a sudden it was just an avalanche. The Timberwolves pushed back in a big way, and that's something we've seen them do over this winning streak that, we had not seen them do a lot, earlier this season. Christian Brown had a dunk just over 10 minutes remaining in the third quarter. Wolves were only up by 5. They call a timeout. They score right out of the timeout on a Julius Randle make. Then Ant hits a tough 3. And then Jaden McDaniels hits a pair of corner threes sandwiched around a Jamal Murray bucket, and the Wolves were up 10. They were leaving Jaden McDaniels open. And to that point, I think he had one basket midway through the third quarter, and then he just turned it on. They kept leaving him open, and Ant kept finding him. 2 consecutive Ant assists for Jaden McDaniels corner threes. And then it was like the Wolves weren't really stopping Denver, but Denver was giving up wide open threes to Minnesota's players. And between Reid and Ant and Jaden McDaniels, all of a sudden this lead was up to 14 very quickly. And by the end of the third quarter, Minnesota was still up by 14 points. Really impressive response from the Wolves after that Finch timeout in the third quarter when things could have really gone sideways on the road. All right. I want to talk a little bit about a couple other kind of team concept type things, and then we'll get into studs and duds, and that's how we'll close the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at TurboTax. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who could do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, where you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates, only an iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Today's episode is also brought to us by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can just stop just managing your money. Start building wealth. You can, I don't know, maybe it's figuring out how much money you'd save if you just didn't get food delivery so often. Or, I don't know, you can collaborate more easily with others in your family, maybe your partner. It's easy to manage the money together. It's smoother than ever. Instead of using multiple apps or, each kind of keeping track of your own thing, you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Okay. To me, the most impressive part about this game was just how, I don't want to say unafraid, because obviously the Wolves aren't afraid of the Nuggets, but how well the Wolves continue to play this Denver team. And I know Aaron Gordon didn't play. That matters. Absolutely. No question. I mean, but they did just beat the Thunder without Aaron Gordon. So, and it's in Denver where they hadn't, they lost like once in their last 10 tries or whatever. They're, even after this game, 22-10 at home. This was a nice win. And Minnesota just plays Denver with the utmost confidence, going all the way back to last year's playoff series, going up 2-0 in the series, and coming back from the deficit, coming back from the massive game 7 deficit to the 2 early season wins this year to this game. Minnesota has no fear for Denver. And even when the Nuggets pushed back and got to within 5 early in the third quarter, as we just talked about, Minnesota pushed all the way back and never backed down. It's not a bad, it is a good strategic matchup for Minnesota. And it was maybe even more so last year when they had Towns to guard Jokic. But there's clearly a mental thing where the Wolves just don't care that it's the Denver Nuggets. They think that they're better. And head to head, they have been over the last couple of years. So that was very, very impressive to me. All things considered. We talked a little bit about the job Minnesota did on Jokic. I thought they did good there. I thought letting Westbrook kind of do his thing is fine. I mean, the dude had 19 points on 12 shots. Nice. He also had 4 turnovers. Was a -22. They kind of let Westbrook do his crazy Westbrook stuff in the first half, and then he was kind of a non-factor. Eliminating the role players was huge. Michael Porter Jr. had a couple of nice offensive rebounds and putbacks, but he had 10 points on 10 shots and was 0 of 3 outside the arc. Minnesota did dodge some bullets with just missed open threes from Denver. There's no question about that, but you kind of make your own luck. And in that sense, the Wolves were not lucky when it came to 50-50 balls. They just played harder. And sometimes it comes down to that. I don't want to completely oversimplify it, which is, I guess, why we talked about all the other stuff first. But there's an element to like the Wolves just played harder than Denver in this game. And they, there was the example late in the game where Ant ends up with the corner three after I think Naz had missed the three at the top of the key and the ball bounced around and Denver got it knocked away. And there were like 3 Nuggets that were all just kind of standing there. And I think it was Jaden McDaniels scooped it up, pump faked a pass down low to whoever the big was, Randle or Gobert, and then kicked it to Ant in the corner for a 3. And that was basically the nail in the coffin. Dave Pasch on ESPN calling the game play-by-play was like, Murray's just standing there. That was weird. I don't really know what happened. Like, it was that sort of a moment. And those moments happened last year in the playoffs. And that happened again for Minnesota in Denver against the Nuggets. And those 50-50 balls, those elements of the game, Minnesota dominated all of them. And, Denver was 7 of 30 on threes, and a third of them were probably mostly open, like mostly uncontested threes. They just missed them. On the flip side, Minnesota was 17 of 40 on 3-point shots. Can only think of a couple of open threes that they missed. They missed a couple of heaves. They missed a couple of contested long threes at the end of the shot clock. Jalen Clark had 1 rim out that was an open 3. I think maybe actually he had 2 rim out that were open 3s. But 17 of 40, 42.5% is a nice number for Minnesota. The crazy thing is if you just look at the box score, it doesn't look like a 20-point blowout. I mean, seriously, like I was ready to talk about, like we still can talk about offensive rebounding because that was big for Minnesota. Each team had 12 offensive rebounds in this game. Minnesota had 5 more turnovers than Denver. Denver had 2 more steals than Minnesota in this game. Denver attempted 6 more free throws. For as much complaining as they were doing, the Denver Nuggets attempted 6 more free throws than Minnesota in this game. Why did the Wolves win? Well, once again, they just blasted their opponents from outside the arc. I think Sunday's game, the Wolves outscored their opponent by 30 from outside the arc. That happened again. They made 10 more threes than Denver. They outscored them by 30 outside the arc. That outweighs the 4 points that they lost at the free throw line to Denver. We talked already about points off of turnovers. The Wolves averaging almost 2 points per possession off of Denver turnovers, and Denver only averaged 1 point per possession on Minnesota turnovers. Minnesota also had 11 assists in this game. Denver only had 20. And that's absolutely the case. The Wolves were forcing Nikola Jokic to try and beat them off the dribble, to try and be creative with him as himself, to try and create for himself. Westbrook scored 19 points. All those were almost surely unassisted. There was one in the open floor that was definitely assisted, but the majority of those were not assisted because he scored the way that Russell Westbrook scores. Jokic had 34 on 23 shots. Nobody else had more than 12 points for the Denver Nuggets. Nobody on the bench attempted more than 5 shots for the Denver Nuggets. It was trying to force Jokic to score himself and not get others involved, and it worked. Only 20 assists on the night for Denver. Minnesota had 31, split up. Ant and DiVincenzo each had 6 assists. Mike Conley had 5, and then 4 from Nickeil Alexander-Walker in just 16 minutes. It's about as good of a 16-minute stint as you could have, is what Nickeil did in this game. I was very impressed with his performance. The Wolves only played essentially 8 rotation guys. Jalen Clark played 4 rotation minutes in the first half, but I don't think he saw the floor in the second half until the fourth quarter. And effectively what was garbage time at that point. The Wolves, I don't think, ever really entirely put Jalen Clark on Jamal Murray. They didn't need to. That's probably the next wrinkle. Like if they need to, at this point, well, actually it's feasible they could play them in the playoffs. But that's another lever that Chris Finch can pull because Jalen Clark would seem to be a pretty solid matchup for somebody to guard Jamal Murray. And he did end up on him a couple of times. I want to shout out Dante DiVincenzo's defense in this game. He's probably, I don't know. I don't know that I'll have him in studs and duds. Well, maybe I will. Maybe I'll save that for studs and duds. It was a really strong DiVincenzo performance. The other thing I was going to say, The second half bench performance, like if you glance at the box score and say, oh, Nas had 8, Dante had 10, or I should say role player performance. So set aside Julius Randle, Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, set it aside. The role player performance, Jaden McDaniels, I think, had a bucket in the first half, and Nas Reid had not scored. Nas finished with 8 points and 5 rebounds, 2 assists, a couple of made threes. And Jaden McDaniels finished with 16 points, 8 rebounds, plus an assist, a steal, and a block, 2 of 4 outside the arc. Nas and Jaden were awesome in the second half of this game, and especially in the fourth quarter as they built the lead up from 10, 12, 14, all the way north at 20. It was those guys that drove that. And the 8 and 5 and 2 from Nas is not gaudy. Neither is the 16 and 13 shots from Jaden. But as kind of nondescript as their first halves were, not bad, but nondescript, they were awesome in the fourth quarter of this game. And I don't want that to go unnoticed. All right. Let's close by talking individual studs and duds, and then we'll peek ahead at the rest of the week. We'll do all that here next to close the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. March Madness is here. Selection Sunday is this upcoming Sunday, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year in the tournament, maybe more on that. I guess it would have to be tomorrow's show this week. Well, we could talk about it next week, too. FanDuel makes it easy to back the underdogs with spreads, totals, and game props. There's tournament games, of course, almost every day next week. So it's easy to stay in the action, and there's always something exciting to bet on. And really, the best thing is that the FanDuel app is super simple and easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly with no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Again, FanDuel.com. Tournament starts next week. Selection Sunday is this Sunday. FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, individual studs and duds in this one. I actually haven't talked that much about Julius Randle and Anthony. I did, I guess, off the top. Julius Randle was probably the best player on the floor, again, for Minnesota. 25 points on 12 shots, which is just supreme efficiency. 9 of 12 from the floor for Julius Randle. 3 of 5 on threes, 4 of 6 at the line, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. He did have 4 turnovers. Guess what? He only played 28 minutes in this game. Randle kind of sort of ate Nikola Jokic's lunch when Jokic was guarding it. And Randle didn't have to guard Jokic as much one-on-one in the defensive end as maybe I was expecting him to maybe do that a little bit more. Just a really impressive Randle performance. We'd seen him distribute a bunch. He had 10 plus assists in 2 of the last 3 games. I think it was, 9 plus assists in all 3 of the last 3 games. So last time out, he was 14 points, 10 assists, 7 rebounds. The time before 13, 10 rebounds, 9 assists, 25, 10 rebounds, 9 assists. So 3 near triple doubles in a row. And this time it's a little bit more in the scoring column, knocking down 3 threes and shooting 9 of 12 from the field. But he still contributed with the 3 assists and the 2 steals. Just a very professional performance once again from Julius Randle. And it seems like on a nightly basis, he's giving them what they need to win. And often recently that's been distributing the ball, passing, creating opportunities for others. In this particular game, they needed him to be aggressive to make Jokic uncomfortable, and he did exactly that. Anthony Edwards, 29 points. Took him 22 shots to do it, which isn't ideal, but he shot the ball better as the game wore on. 5 of 12 from 3. That'll play. That is right on the nose for what you would expect for Anthony Edwards in terms of efficiency. 4 of 5 at the line, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, and a steal. Again, started slow, but I thought it was a good Ant performance. I really do. And his timely scoring in the third quarter helped the Wolves push this thing from just a 5-point lead back to double digits. So that was definitely good. My third stud, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to split it between Jaden McDaniels and Dante DiVincenzo. Jaden had 16 points on 7 of 13. And again, I think he only had 2 points at halftime. And then all of a sudden in the second half, it was offensive rebounds. He had 3 total offensive rebounds in this game, 8 total rebounds overall. It was offensive rebounds. It was those consecutive corner threes I mentioned earlier in the third quarter. It was scoring in the paint, running the floor, like just another well-rounded Jaden McDaniels performance. And to see him turn into the player he is currently has been such a treat over the last couple of months. And he was great in this game. Talked briefly about Dante earlier. He was a team best plus 23. In a game they won by 20, garbage time wasn't as kind to the Wolves. A plus 23. Nobody else was better than a plus 17 in this game. Dante had 10 points on 4 of 10 shooting. It was just 2 of 6 outside the arc. I think he hit his first 2 and missed his last 4. But he had 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and 2 blocks. He had the block that was initially called a foul that upon review was overturned to just a clean block. And there was another one where he just completely stripped. I think it was Brown, kind of came over the top, but had enough body control and hand-eye coordination to just slap the ball away. The effort level that Dante DiVincenzo gives on a nightly basis on both ends of the floor, but especially defensively for a guy who is a plus defender, but is a little undersized and is a scorer. Like the dude scored 16 a game last year for the Knicks and was a regular starter, was a hero in the Garden. And here he is playing defense this hard on a Wednesday night in Denver in March. Like, always gives 110%, which I hate that cliche. Always gives 100% because you can't have more than 100% of something. But to have 6 assists, no turnovers, contribute 6 rebounds, be third on the team in rebounding in this game, tied for the team lead in assists, and drop 10 points on, I guess 10 points on 10 shots is not great. But he did everything else. And those 2 threes early helped carry the offense in the first quarter when there wasn't a whole lot of flow to it. And as I mentioned off the top, like the offense just wasn't getting going, and DiVincenzo helped it early in this game. A really strong DiVincenzo game. I don't have any duds. I don't. Conley was good, 8 and 5 in 20 minutes. Nice to see him only need to play 20 minutes once again. Gobert, 11 and 10. Good bench minutes from Jalen Clark defensively. He didn't do anything offensively. That's fine. Nikhil, we talked about, was awesome in 16 minutes. Garbage minutes from Minot, Garza, Terrence Shannon Jr. and Rob Dillingham, mostly a mixed bag. The defense left something to be desired. Garza was super active, which was nice to see. But that's kind of it. This was just a really strong Timberwolves performance. They clearly have Denver's number. They get one more opportunity to continue their recent dominance over the Nuggets on April 1st at Denver once again. That'll be another national TV game. That's a TNT game on April 1st. So what is that? Just under 3 weeks from now. And as I mentioned earlier, like you look at the standings, Minnesota's tied with Golden State for 6-7. They're 3.5 behind 5. They're 4 behind 4. They're 4.5 with the tiebreaker. Actually, 4.5 behind Denver and 3. Denver and Memphis are now tied for the 2/3 spot in the West. So everybody's jumbled together, and only 4.5 games separate the 2 and 7 spots in the West. Anything could happen. Remember, my All-Star break bold prediction is the Wolves would finish in 4th in the Western Conference. That's still a little bit of a stretch, but it's in the realm, especially with the upcoming opponents the Wolves have. We will talk about the matchup against the Magic on tomorrow's show. I will be hosting a live postcast over at Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube on Friday night following Wolves Magic. Tomorrow's regular Wolves Locked On Wolves podcast will cover a couple other topics. We'll also cover the Magic preview. And then next up is Utah on Sunday, and then Indiana, and 2 games against New Orleans, all in Minnesota, all at Target Center. The Pacers, of course, have a winning record. They've struggled a little bit more lately, and the Wolves will surely be favored in that game. They'll be favored in all 5 of these, and significantly so in 4 of the 5. So a huge opportunity to stretch this thing to could it be a 10-game winning streak? I don't want to put the cart before the horse, 11-game winning streak. It's completely on the table for the Wolves. They just got to take care of business. It's so cliche. Again, another cliche. But that's all they really have to do. There's a lot in front of them, and they're peaking at the right time. They look like a legit playoff team. They're playing like they're in the playoffs already, which is super nice to see. All right, so I got for you today here on the show. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder, you can subscribe to the daily email newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. It's one stop for Ultimate Wolves and NBA coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.